And it's been the opportunity of my life and the purpose of my life to have this time, to really bring the importance of our communities to the forefront of we as nonprofits and others in the sector, to make sure that we are really advancing equity and justice, and that we really advance this through education, through social service, and through a type of engagement in our communities that this panel represents. After 17 years, it's time for me to transition into a new role. And I'm really pleased that my partner for 6 years in this, the Chief Operating Officer of the YMCA of San Francisco, Jamie Bruning-Miles, will be assuming the role of President and CEO beginning on October 1. After a little break on my part, I'll return shortly after the beginning of the year in a new role as President Emeritus. And so for the larger community that doesn't really know this great man, Jamie Bruning-Miles, I'd just like for Jamie to say a few words.
Thank you, Chuck. And thank you for your service for 2 decades as the CEO of the YMCA of San Francisco, and personally for your mentorship of me over the last 6 years. I look forward to partnering with you in your new role. Transforming the Y to a focused youth development organization guided by meaningful partnerships like we have tonight in our panel is part of your legacy of your leadership. I'm excited to take over as the upcoming CEO. I look forward to the future of organization. This event tonight is an example of where we're going, bringing relevant stakeholders together to converse on topics that are impacting the communities we serve. And educating our youth tonight, our youth during the pandemic affects each of us. So the time is right for this conversation. This is the first in a series of town halls to lift the voices of bold leaders like yourselves who are on the front lines of change for our communities. Personal thank you to Superintendent Tony Thurman, Executive Director Maria Sue, and Commissioner Stefan Cook for agreeing to spend the night with us. Look forward to our conversation together and our continued support of the YMCA of San Francisco.
Thanks, Jamie. And again, thanks to each one of you. I've known you for years and I've admired you from close and afar. And we're at a very special and important place in our city, in our region, in America, and in the world. And the future, I think, of society really rests in the boldness and the braveness that we need to have in order to advance education. I'm the grandfather of a 2.5-year-old, and I see on a daily basis, because I'm able to hold him and to hug him, and we live nearby each other, the privilege that I have to witness his growth. And I know that the foundation of life begins so early. A child only gets a chance to be a baby once, only gets a chance to be a toddler once, and to be able to develop those skills and habits, and also the mindset to be a lifelong learner. And so the urgency of education doesn't begin at 12th grade or when people are in college. It begins fundamentally at the beginning of life. And on our panel tonight are 3 leaders in this arena. The Chief Executive of Education for the state of California, that not only has, K through 8, but all the way through elements of higher education at his responsibility. We have the former president and still incumbent member of the San Francisco Board of Education, our Commissioner of Education, Stefan Cook, and holding the responsibility of public education is something that has never been probably more understood by more people, as they have had to have their children at home and understand what it really is going on in the classroom, as teachers are taking on a daily basis, on a moment-by-moment basis, the urgency of education in the classroom. And to have Maria Sue, who is the director of the Department of Children, Youth, and their Families, this unique resource that we have in San Francisco that allows us to focus on the entire spectrum of young people to age 24 and their families, to ensure that we're laying a foundation for our future in what we do now to make sure that families are in the space of being able to take education and their own social development, their economic progress, and how all of this has to come together so that we have a framework, not only to educate our children, but so that people can have jobs. So referring to something that I was saying a little bit earlier, Families now are seeing what teachers are doing. Families are having to have their children at home, instructing them, dealing with the issues that the teachers in the classroom are facing every day. The complexity of education has never been more apparent to us. And so I would really love for our panelists, to really help us to understand when you really look at this uncharted territory that we're in. Now, people say that as if it's scary. It can also be bold space, and it can be space that we really need to address collectively for outcomes that are really absolutely necessary for us to advance as a society. But when you really think about the future of education as informed by where we are in these times, how do you look at how we will advance, how we will progress, and how children will be able to be educated, not just babysat, but educated, and families will be able to work? So I'd love to start with our superintendent, and then ask for Director Sue, and then Commissioner Cook, also in that order, to respond. What is the future that we're facing?
Thank you, Chuck, and it's an honor to be on with these great panelists. Chuck, thank you for your leadership at the YMCA and in San Francisco and in our region. It's been an honor to work with you. I also want to welcome Jamie to his new role, and I've had the great fortune to work closely with Stevon and Maria, and grateful to have you all leading in this great city in San Francisco. The future has many questions right now because the pandemic, I think, is the biggest challenge that most of us will face in our lifetime. And we've got to, by my estimation, focus on three things. Safety first. And while it's difficult and we know it's better for young people to be in-person instruction, we know that right now, distance learning provides the safest conditions for our students until our schools and counties can get off of the monitoring list and into a place where we can provide safe in-person instruction. Secondly, we have to continue to address the social, emotional, and learning needs of our students. Counseling and support. This is difficult. This is hard for our students. This is hard for our families. And third, we have to continue to talk about the quality of learning that our students receive. Obviously, this is not ideal in any way. And this is not what we had intended for learning. And we know that in distance learning that there are equity concerns that often exacerbate the opportunity gaps that many of our students of color and students from low-income backgrounds experience. But the reality is that our students are always learning and that we have to continue to lean in to support them. San Francisco School District's been very innovative in how it's approaching them. It's an honor to work with them and 1,000 districts across our state. Because right now, 97% of our schools are in distance learning. And that is the way that we've got to move forward. We're working with every sector that you can think of to help provide meals, to provide computing devices, to provide training to educators and staff. These are tough times, but what is certain is that we will do more together for our 6 million students. We cannot control what the coronavirus does. We can't control its impacts, but we can control how we respond. And by shouldering together and making sure that we have personal protective equipment, that we wear face coverings and wash our hands and maintain physical distancing, we know that we can keep people safe and give our students a chance to learn. We also know, Chuck, that this experience is changing the way education looks. California was not ready for distance learning like most states in the nation. We went into distance learning overnight, and we did so to keep students safe. What it has shown us is that we have to think differently about everything that we do. One, erasing the digital divide. I cannot believe that it existed for decades in this state with the resources that we have. We have got to close it. I've created a task force for closing the digital divide. I'm happy to share more about that. But it also has helped us to think differently about, students are more than a test score. We've had to dispense with standardized test taking. We've had to really think about how we provide new types of training to educators and new ways to measure education. Nothing will ever replace great teachers who are at the center of what our students do and learn. But we've got to think differently now about the supports that we provide to our educators and to our families and having family engagement. And the YMCA has been a big part of that. What you do for after school programs and childcare, what you do for creating pods that partner with the school district, such incredible things. We're grateful for that. So much for us to learn, but we're leaning in together to support 6 million students in our state and 40 million Californians in California.
Superintendent, let me just say that, with that said, I greatly appreciate your compliments with respect to the why. We're not the only partner in this, as everyone well knows. How does the nonprofit sector really help to support what we need to do now? And what message do you give not only to the why, but to all of the other nonprofit partners that are coming to the call right now?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Nonprofit partners are so important to our work, again, with providing supports in after school programs and childcare programs as locations for where meals can be distributed. These things have been so important. I am personally grateful for the WISE programs around youth and government. I've had the opportunity to work with this program for years. In this pandemic, we have leaned on student leaders to really lift up voices as we look at examples of racism and police brutality, and how do we help our country get to a place of healing. It's been our young people who have said, how do we get more ethnic studies in our schools? How do we, and San Francisco obviously has done a lot in the area of ethnic studies and computer science for all, really thinking about equity, which is our focus tonight. But our nation needs healing. And it is our young people who are helping us to really lean in and to really understand how we can create healing, how we can create more racial justice and social justice. And I'm excited to work with the Youth and Government Program. They've helped me over the years when I was in the legislature to introduce bills to do more civic engagement for young people. And now we're seeing young people lead the way. The nonprofit sector plays an important role to partner with our schools and with government. Nonprofits have a kind of flexibility that sometimes government agencies don't. And they have the ability to help us with so many of the intangibles. They help us raise funds, they help us distribute funds, they help deliver programs, and they're our partners. They provide school-based mental health services and resources that families need. It's been difficult, I think, for many of our nonprofit partners to even just keep their doors open, especially those that rely on government during a time when the pandemic has just really impacted our economy. And so my message to the nonprofits is thank you. And please continue to hang in there and to do as you've done, to let us know how we in government can be better partners and can help you help us, because we can't do any of the things that we do without our nonprofit partners. It's an incredibly important sector for the development of young people and support of their families.
Thank you, Superintendent. I'd like to pass this to Jamie so that we can bring Director Sue into the conversation.
Maria, I have a question for you. Mainly what Superintendent Thurman was talking about, safety first, social emotional, and quality of learning, and what you've done with the Community Hubs Initiative. It's a critical role in supporting our most vulnerable youth and families. In what ways do you see the Y best supporting these efforts, and how can the Y and other nonprofits be part of the solution that you've created in San Francisco?
Thank you for the question. And first, I just want to say congratulations, Chuck, on just very well deserved accolades for just everything that you've done for the Y and for the greater community. And then congratulations, Jamie. Big shoes to walk into. And I'm sure that we will continue to build out your legacy as you take over. Thank you so much for having me. And honestly, I would love to just continue to listen to State Superintendent Tony Thurman continue to talk, because he's saying all the right things. We're talking about making sure that we lead with safety. We're talking about making sure that we take the lens of equity and social justice and prioritizing children first. As we demonstrate to the world that we can do this and do this safely, it has to be through the lens of our children. And in San Francisco, what we have said is, never waste a pandemic. And so therefore, we are trying to figure out ways to strengthen the partnerships that we have with each other. So with city government and city departments, which sometimes, we don't work together so well. But then also partner with our school district and with our other key stakeholders like the YMCAs and other nonprofit agencies, because we want to make sure that we, rapid response is such a cliche word, but we all have that sense of urgency of, if we can't do it, like if we can't do it now, when are we ever going to do it? So we have to do it now. And part of the doing it now means that we have to be creative, we have to be innovative, and really just break down those barriers that have prevented us from doing it. And some of the barriers that have prevented us from doing it has been a lot of the, well, those are my kids, and this is my space, and those are my data. Well, what we've done in San Francisco is say, number one, those are all of our kids. And because they are all of our kids, it's all of our space. And because it's all of our space, it is all of our data. So we have to move together in a coordinated fashion. And that's what's made the learning hubs or the community hubs possible. Because we've said that together, we're going to create spaces that will be safe for children, that will really address those social emotional needs that our children have, and the supports that our highest need families also have. But we will do this in using all the spaces that we have available in our city, because we are leading with safety. We're making sure that as we open up these facilities for families to access, we're going to do it in a safe way. So we're making them smaller spaces. We're making sure that there are enough PPEs, protective equipment for our staff. We're making sure that there is technology devices there, so that no families will feel, what about me? Where do I fit in, at least in San Francisco? Where do I fit in the San Francisco narrative? And so in San Francisco, we have an answer for that. You fit in the narrative because you belong here. And that's part of the hub. I can go more into the hub if you want.
Let me ask you a question. You were clear about what we can do in the support. So there's participants on the listen-in right now. As a parent, can you just dive a little bit more on what they can do to support this initiative? Because this is their children, we're doing it with parents. How would you like parents to support this initiative as well?
Well, as a parent myself with 2 school-age children, distance learning is hard. Distance learning is hard, and also as an adult, trying to like be self-motivated to follow a structure, and that's hard. I can't even imagine all of our little kids and trying to tell them to stay to a schedule without supervision. So I just want to say to parents, you are warriors, you're fierce, and we're going to get through this together, because we have to. We will win. And when we do, once we get through this, we're going to actually be in a better place, because we will actually have now a coordinated system of care that prioritizes children, and children are at the center of our universe. So part of the hub and part of the work and the desire of this effort is to make sure that we have a place that's in the neighborhood where families can walk to, because we didn't want to continue to stress our streets and our public transportation system. So it's making, having families come and come into the space, and then having adult providers there who will support kids to log into their Zoom or Google Classroom, help with all of these different applications that even I myself am just constantly confused about. But then we also bring in that other part of learning, which is the joy and the peer relationship and the enrichment and all of those other things that make learning a true experience, right? It's not just opening up a book and following along. It's all those other things. So for parents, it's to go to our website. If you live in San Francisco, go to our website, dcyf.org/care, and you can learn more about this effort. I will say that when we designed it for the most disconnected children, youth, and families, because we did this through the lens of equity. And we wanted to really flip the script on all those children who have always been at the back of the line to now be given the pass to be at the front of the line. And so we're talking about making sure that we prioritize children that live in public housing, who are homeless, who are in the foster care system, who are English language learners. So they have this opportunity first, and that we support them as what we in the city should be doing to continue to support them so that they can thrive and prosper from the great education that our school district is providing.
Well
Yeah,
said.
thank you. I would just like to, Stephen, I'm going to ask you a question around, creativity and innovation. I mean, we live in the Bay Area. We live in an era and a time and a place of incredible invention and creativity. It's what we're known for. You have a tremendous career in helping to bridge the digital divide. Your legendary work with Mission Bit really equipped many, many families and households to develop a growth mindset. Sitting in the Unified School District is one of the principal voices and agents of that. How will the school district really innovate and be creative in this space in challenging a lot of the digital and other divides that we are facing, the learning gaps that we're facing, and such as we move farther into this new model of education?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you for the question. And to be called a legend by you, that warms my heart because you're the true legend in this work, and along with the really heroic work that Miss Sue is doing, and Mr. Thurman has been a longtime advocate for public education, and it's been great to watch his rise in his leadership at the state level. One of the actual responses from many educators who are often critical of district policy is how incredible the response has been to digital access. So the ability to deploy laptops, to secure hotspots. There's been a lot of great feedback just in terms of getting devices out into the community. One of the major gaps we still struggle with is our dead zones in the city, even as known for its technology in San Francisco, we have many areas where Wi-Fi access is still weak. So, and those happen to be the communities that Ms. Sue is talking about building the community learning hubs for. Because of the nature of this entire pandemic, it has required a lot of creative thinking. So the first thing was, as everyone has said, how do we keep people safe, and how do we make sure people are fed? Just to walk back a little bit, when we were one of the first school districts in the country to close, and before that, we had different sites closing, sort of like sporadically, because students were having symptoms that we thought might be COVID related. So we closed Lowell for 2 weeks, and then we closed Lakeshore Elementary. It was like a very, very scary time. So everything is kind of was on pause, right? I just did a conversation with policymakers from across the country, answering the question around pandemic pods, which has picked up a lot of discussion in the public realm. Right? These pandemic pods have sprouted up across the country, and it's been met with a lot of criticism. And so I spoke to leaders in Texas, Houston, Louisiana. Is this innovation or is it racism? Right? Are we advancing opportunities for children, or are we further segregating our communities? Now I mentioned educators being having great feedback about the access to devices. One of their greatest concerns is that as a result of distance learning, we're going to severely compromise the future of our children, because instruction in person does work best. So we have a lot of educators figuring out I want to do this hub thing. Like, how do I, because in-person instruction, we know is incredibly needed. And we know that for some of our most vulnerable populations, the home isn't always safe. And how on earth do you teach a kindergartner to read on Zoom, right? There's like a lot of open questions that quite frankly, the virtual setting, they're still going to be unresolved. And so that's what the iteration and the creativity and the collaboration has to come into play. Like everyone has used the word together, juntos. You know, I've been learning Spanish during my shelter in place. And so we really do have to walk through this together. So I hope that answers the question. I also just want to welcome Jamie and say a thank you to everyone that's attending the discussion.
Jamie, do you want to pitch the next question?
Yes, I would actually. I'm going to Superintendent Thurman. Then I'll go back to Stefan. Stefan, how are we looking at the social emotional aspects of youth right now? We're 6 months in the pandemic. We know that the trauma of youth is longstanding. How are some ways that we can lessen the burden on the youth when really we're all going through this, but they're feeling it more than anybody else? So any response, either Maria or Stefan, on how we're dealing with the social emotional side of this work?
Yeah, I can answer first, Maria. So for that was our first priority, was social emotional. When we went to shelter in place, the only request of the district was take care of your family, and how can we support you while you're at home? We'll get to the instruction piece, but let's just make sure you're okay. So as an intervention, as a way that we've been trying to further, support families, is through wellness checks. Our student services department, along with many of our social workers and a lot of our educators, have been in constant communication with families, trying to figure out what other needs, doing surveys, doing food drives. There's been a lot of hands-on the ground engagement with families just around their well-being. Now, that said, some of our sites, when shelter in place started, couldn't get a hold of people. We went to shelter in place in March, and several schools spent the next 2 months trying to find people. And so we haven't been able to get to everybody with 100%, I say completion or engagement, but people have been trying incredibly hard to do so. So we have a district policy that is focused on wellness check-ins, where we're calling families, and several sites that know their students best have also been putting their own self at risk, going to students' homes, calling several times, figuring out, what they can do to best support young people at this critical time.
So I just want to add that I just fully appreciate what the school district in San Francisco has been doing, because teachers have stepped up, principals have stepped up, admin staff, everyone has stepped up. And I think this is part of just the pandemic is requiring this sense of urgency to respond. And so it's just, with greatest appreciation for what the school district has been doing to support our children and families. And so from DCYF, I think hopefully most of your viewers know that DCYF provides funding to nonprofit agencies. So we fund upwards of 200 different agencies throughout the city of San Francisco that provides services both in schools and out in the community. So actually, for an example, the YMCA actually has contracts with us that provide services in schools and out in the community. And so for all of our nonprofit agencies, when shelter in place happened, we pivoted very quickly to doing remote supports. And so our CBOs they attempted to do Zoom calls and to do these kind of video conferencing. But because the technology was so new, we weren't doing this normally, like during pre-COVID. And so our CBO started shifting into just phone calls, right? Phone calls, drive-bys, just to check and see how people were doing. And then we did the food distribution. So we partnered with the school district, we partnered with the city to do food distribution for our highest need children, for those who were isolated, or for children who lived with parents or providers who were part of the vulnerable population. We also supported distribution of materials for families. So there were a lot, and we also stood up emergency child and youth care program. So this was an initiative where the mayor said, actually the mayor and the head of our Department of Public Health said, oh my goodness, we're going into shelter in place. And the one thing that will help us mitigate the infection is for us to fully staff all these hospitals, because we were bracing ourselves for the surge. And in order to fully staff hospitals, all of these hospital workers had to be able to go to work. But we knew that a lot of the hospital workers had children in our public schools or in schools throughout the city. So we partnered with the YMCA and the Boys and Girls Club and other nonprofit agencies, as well as the Rec and Park Department and San Francisco Public Library, to open up our spaces to serve children of hospital workers and essential frontline workers. And that was so that we could have a rapid response for the pandemic. What we realized during that process was the importance of in-person contact, the importance of relationship. And, you know, digging into my child psychology background, it's really traumatic for these children, where on one day, right, they were in school, everything was kind of normal, and then literally the next day they were not allowed to go back to school, with very little answer for why, because parents didn't even know why, and you know, no one knew what was going to happen. And so just imagine as a child where your sense of safety and your sense of connection and stability literally overnight just disappeared. That's really hard. And then if you think of a child who's actually kind of used to that level of instability and uncertainty, that's even worse. Because the message for that child is not only is their environment not trustworthy, but the entire city is now, you can't rely on the entire city. And then you start hearing about the state and everything else. So that was really scary for us. And so that's why we worked so hard to try to have more in-person opportunities for children, particularly our highest need children, because we need to figure out a way to stop that trauma and to really try to move towards healing, because without doing anything, I just couldn't even want to imagine the trauma that was happening to those children. And so we were trying to lead not only through the lens of equity, but also to try to mitigate as much of that social, emotional, and mental well-being issue that the state superintendent was referring to. And that's why we were prioritizing in person. And then working really hard with Department of Public Health to just try to figure out, if we were to do this, what would it look like? What would it take? And that was really what my question to DPH was. What will it take? You know, is it just to make a small, you know, like a size of 5 kids or whatever? What would it take? Whatever it took, we were going to try to do it. And that was the mentality we took to go into this. And then I started getting all these other city departments to join in on the call to action. And it was the call to prioritize our children and the call to make sure that we were not continuing to harm our children as this virus was harming all of us.
Tony, do you want to take this up a little bit too?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo all the great comments that you heard from Dr. Sue and from Trustee Cook. You know, we also have heard from parents who've just said, this is just too hard. And how do I make sense of this? So everything from, I don't have a computer, to I don't understand the schoolwork. Distance learning is hard. I'm trying to hold down my job. You know, when we first moved into distance learning, we actually put on what we call virtual support circles for parents. We put on a separate virtual support circle for students. And in each case, we brought on someone who you all know in San Francisco, a great pediatrician who knows all about trauma, Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris, who is now our state Surgeon General. And we had her come on and she gave some great doctorly advice, but we also just helped to provide a message to families to do the best that you can. At the end of the day, the most important thing is the safety of your children and your family and dealing with the social emotional well-being of your family. And if you don't understand the work or you need help with the work, to contact your school district. We're leaning in heavily to try to help districts build a stronger family engagement program. San Francisco does a very nice job here. We're trying to help others to be able to do those same things so that families have somebody to call, you know, especially families who don't have a computer. You can't tell a family who doesn't have a computer to email somebody when they say, we don't understand the work. And so we're working with other districts across the state to help them build a kind of phone hotline where there's someone to call. And as you've heard from all the panelists, you know, this is a very difficult time. It has led to an increase in depression and other mental health challenges. And so we've, you know, and as you heard from Trustee Cook, sometimes families didn't even check in. You know, our schools were providing meals at 5,000 locations across the state, but many of our families were struggling for basic needs. And so as Trustee Cook points out, sometimes families weren't checked in and we weren't able to find where they were. And so as we move into distance learning again, we're trying to figure out ways to offset that. We've built what I call a counseling coalition that has a number of counseling groups that are part of it so that families can get help anywhere in the state if they need it, to provide more resources to our families. For anyone who's looking, obviously you can contact your school district, but you can also send us a note at mentalhealth@cde.ca.gov, and we connect people to different mental health resources all across the state. Wherever you might live, we want to help you get connected. Again, we just want to remind people, you just do your best. Take care of your physical safety first and your mental health and well-being equally. Our students taught us a lot. When we did the support circles for them, they said they wanted more, you know, opportunities. We were worried about their experiences around trauma. They began teaching us. And they said, we want to deal with the trauma of racism. We want to deal with what we're seeing on our television every single day. And they helped us to build a whole new series where we did a mini series on ethnic studies, where we had one of your assembly members, David Chu, was on, Dolores Huerta was on, Karen Korematsu, who is the daughter of the late Fred Korematsu, a civil rights icon who was jailed in an internment camp. You know, we just had an opportunity to really help students understand the contributions of African Americans and Latinos and Asian American, Pacific Islanders and Native Americans, what they've contributed here in the face of all this racism, that we are more than our experiences, we are more than our trauma, and that we can do more together. And so obviously there's so much more that still needs to be done, but we intend to keep leaning in with more virtual support circles. We've worked with our PTAs. And again, I can't say it enough how much I want to commend our students, our educators, our parents, our administrators, our community leaders for what they are doing. There is no playbook for what is a worldwide pandemic. And our families and students and their partners are showing a kind of resilience that it takes to get through this. We know that there are more challenges to come. We know that there are more questions than answers, but what is certain is that we can do more together when we shoulder the load together, and we will be safer together as we move forward.
Well, thank you for that response. You know, the term equity is a North Star for many of us, and you know, when it's dark outside, you have to have some way of navigating, and I certainly appreciate, you know, the importance of that, because it has really shifted, you know, this broad conversation about what education is, where education lies, and who we're listening to. There's an immense community out there that wants to support this. We have in our community hubs model, or in any of our learning models, we have time that is programmed for other, let's call them activities and programs. You know, Superintendent, you talked about youth in government. We have people that are very, very interested in exposing young people to the out of doors and using that as a way of mitigating, you know, the traumas. We also know that the arts can play a really vital role in the whole child development. This is something that DCYF actually built into their model of change. When DCYF put out their last round of long-term contracts, they were looking at the whole child, the whole community, and the whole family. When we think about this from a holistic perspective, what are some of the other resources that we have? Who else can we can bring into this, with a focus on, the out of doors, the importance of nature experiences for children, the importance of the arts for voice and for expression and for therapy. There are a lot of really well-meaning and great intended partners out there. How can we bring more people into these solutions?
I just wanted to state the obvious, and I think one of the panelists has put it in the chat, that the more we can do outdoors, the better for us. And when people are wearing a face covering and they're outdoors, the data shows there is almost no case of someone who's contracted COVID-19. Now, obviously, our ability to be outdoors in the Bay Area has been exacerbated by the fires and air quality. And so we have to offset that. But the more that we can safely do things outdoors creates safe opportunities for us. But again, I want to encourage everyone to continue wearing a face covering as you're doing that. And I think the other thing that you point to, Chuck, is the importance of the kinds of activities that are so important to our students, that they miss all the after school activities, sports and enrichment and all the things that, I was one of those students too. I looked forward to going to school because of what happened after school. And sometimes it was the motivation of after school programs that helped me to be a better student, because I wanted to be engaged and I knew I needed to do a good job during class time to participate in sports and extracurriculars. And our students miss that. Right now, we're asking our students to hold from not having physical contact in ways that could cause them to be safe. But, when it's safe to do so, to still get out there and get a walk in and get a run. Everyone makes fun of me when I go out there. I still have my face mask right below my chin when I'm getting physical exercise, in case I need to quickly put it up again. And Chuck's role modeling for us, a great face covering with some branding for the YMCA, that we can still engage in outdoor activities and physical activities. We just have to be safe and careful. I saw a great thing that I love. It says that when I wear a mask, I'm doing that to help keep you safe. And when you wear a mask, you're doing that to help me keep safe. Let's commit to each other and engage in those activities when we can.
Thanks, Superintendent. There are some questions from the attendees as well, so I'm going to ask, and anybody could pick up, please. So I'll read the first question. Not just the training for the teachers, but training for the parents. So many parents of the young students in K through second grade with non-English speaking have little knowledge how to navigate Zoom. Perhaps the Y can give parent classes as well. So what's the role of CBOs helping navigate for non-native English speakers? Anyone want to take that one?
Maybe I can take, were you asking Stefan to take that?
No, you can take it, Marie.
Well, just that the design of the hub was so that we could create a place where we would provide that type of support for children. I think there was a follow-up question about there, how do you support parents to support their children? And I think this is where it was very strategic of us to work with agencies like the YMCA that have multiple programs in all aspects of family support, and having those opportunities be integrated inside a hub to create that type of supports for families. We haven't actually designed what that family support component could look like. And maybe, Jamie, that could be our first partnership together, because I do want to figure out how we do that. And of course, we do work with the Y through our Family Resource Center initiative. And it would be a good opportunity for us to, once again, not waste this pandemic to think about a way for us to integrate strategic family support, particularly for English language learners, inside a more comprehensive program like the hubs.
Yeah, and I'll jump in quickly just on some of the resources SFUSD has. It only took a pandemic, but we actually have a line you can call. I'm going to share the number if people want to jot it down. I can also, I don't know if I can share out the link later, but our Department of Technology is taking calls around technology needs, also calls around technology literacy support. The number is 415-241-6476. The office is open Monday through Friday from 7:30 to 5:30. So the first line of connection for a family is with their school site. They can also contact that number to get a hold of someone at our Department of Technology if they're having issues with something related to their technology. But just to build on this point about access for parents, I'm in conversations with educators every day, and there is still a gap around getting an understanding of the software, understanding the software Zoom. So people are still learning. So we keep iterating this thing around together. I think even as we were logging on earlier today, people were like, "Oh, I'm not muted," So no one is like, it's exactly where we all want ourselves to be with this platform just yet. And so, yes, parents need support. Educators, they definitely still need support as they're getting well-versed with the Zoom software.
Maria, putting together the Community Hubs initiative is a big undertaking. I'd like for you just to explain a little bit more about how it works, where it's focused. You've talked about its focus on the most vulnerable students and scholars in our community. But also, there's a financial gap here still that we're facing. And in order to really stand this whole initiative up, we still have some way to go. How are we going to bridge that gap, given the complexity of the hubs and the fact that this is going to be something that is going to have to stand up for as long as it takes for us to operate our schools safely again?
Right. Thank you, Chuck, for that question. So for those of you who are not familiar, I just saw in the chat that some might not be familiar with what a community hub is. I just want to let you know very quickly that on July 23rd, our Mayor London Breed, announced this initiative. And part of the initiative was to say, we in the city will come together to provide supports for our highest need children. And that initiative is called the Community Hubs Initiative. This is a neighborhood-based program where we, through the lens of equity, identified neighborhood sites in our city where children live. The idea for that is because we wanted children and families to be able to walk to the hubs. We did not want to increase congestion on our streets, nor did we want to increase frustration with our public transportation system. But the hubs will provide full day in-person programming that will support young people who come to the hubs to log into their distance learning program and curriculum. We will have all of these sites Wi-Fi'd. So right now I have staff that's out there testing the bandwidth. So if you can imagine some of these sites, because we've got nonprofit agencies, we have rec and park sites, we have library sites, but we're also bringing in private sites like churches who are opening up their space to allow us to run a hub there. Some of our churches are not Wi-Fi'd. And so using this opportunity, once again, not wasting a pandemic, using this opportunity to wire some of our churches, wire some of our public housing facilities, so that we can then turn those community spaces in public housing into hubs. So what is available at a hub? The hubs will have, once again, digital connectivity. We will have some tech there. We will be serving meals. We'll be serving 3 meals a day. as well as providing all of that social emotional connections that young people need. All that enrichment type programs. We will have some outdoor space that we will do the outdoor and physical activities. The idea for this is just so that we can have another option for families, so that they don't have to choose between going to work or staying home and supporting their children. The problem is that we don't have enough resources to serve all of our families. In SFUSD alone, we've got 24,000 children who qualify for free and reduced lunch. So we don't have the resources to do that. We only have resources to serve up to 5,000 or 6,000 children. And because of that, we had to be a little bit more selective. And that's why we're prioritizing children who live in public housing, children who are homeless, children who are in our single room occupancies, children who are in foster care, and who are English language learners. So as you can imagine, it's a very hard task to recruit and then to register these children, because there are lots of children who want access into this program. And right now we are limited by what we can afford. We're also limited because our state is saying that we can only have 14 children inside a space. So as you can imagine, the economy of scale doesn't work in our favor here. If I open up a small rec center, I can only put 14 children in there. That means I need a lot of rec centers and a lot of libraries. So right now we're limited by how many facilities we have. We are very thankful that a lot of our companies are opening their doors to us, because they're saying, look, I'm going to be, my entire team, my entire staff is working from home. And so they're going to open their doors to us. But those companies are kind of down in our financial district. They're not where families are. So that means that we need to figure out how to transport families down there. So the gap is great for us right now. And so we are looking at other resources to help us close that gap. So anything will be helpful. The mayor has actually agreed to allow and expand the Give to SF model to include the community hubs as part of one of their funding streams. So that's very helpful. But we're always looking for more supports if there are any out there.
I can add to your question and ask the superintendent first, and then it's going to go back from the state to local. So Commissioner Cook, Director Sue, I'll ask you as well. And it's a question from the participants. Are there meetings being set up directly with the CEOs of the tech builders and suppliers, the materials needed? This is the time for them to step up forward big time. So Superintendent, you want to take that? Is there a state level conversation happening and then bring it locally?
Yes, there has been. When we went into the pandemic, it was obvious 1 million students didn't have access to a computing device. 1 million students didn't have access to the internet. This is an embarrassment in California when we're the 5th wealthiest economy, and California is home to Silicon Valley and so much great technology. Having said that, I created a task force to close the digital divide to help us get more donations for our students who are without computers. It's hard to say this. While some companies have come forward, many have not. And so I personally reached out to 100 California companies, asking them to commit to California kids to get computing devices. And we've been scrambling. We have been able to get commitments from internet service providers to provide low-cost internet, high-speed internet. And we've said to them, listen, we don't want any barriers. We don't want anybody having to give a social security number. We don't want anybody to have to give you their financial history. Just make it easy. And we've gotten the internet service companies to provide a phone number you can call if you're interested in getting access to a low-cost internet. We have also worked with many manufacturers to prioritize California students for the remaining computing devices that still exist. As you all have heard, there is a worldwide shortage on computing devices. And so we basically went to every manufacturer and said, give us what you have. In some cases, it was Staple and Office Depot. Apple and T-Mobile came together and said, we'll give you a few 100,000 devices for any school district that's looking for a reduced cost device that has, it's an iPad that is internet enabled. It can be used in any school district with any platform. It ultimately costs $10 a month for the internet for the families. And so the other thing is that we work with the governor and the legislature. They provided $5 billion for school districts to purchase computing devices and other distance learning tools. And so, again, for any district that's looking to get computing devices for families that need them, these devices still exist through this relationship. And we want anyone who's looking for help to let us know. I don't know how you do digital distance learning without access to a working computer and the internet. It's not that it's impossible, but why would we ask that in a state, in a nation that has the wealth and the resources that we do? And so many of you have reached out to us directly. Digital Divide at cde.ca.gov is how we can be reached from those who want to donate, those who want to help, those who need help getting connected to resources. We're not going to stop until we've closed the digital divide. We're working with the legislature. Assembly member Phil Ting is one of those who's helping to make this happen, to generate, billions of dollars to build the infrastructure for connectivity all across the state. Because it's sad, there are many places in the state where you can't even use a hotspot because there's no infrastructure for connectivity. And so that's what we've been busy doing, is really chasing down California companies saying, help us. Now, you all have some great companies in Salesforce that I know have helped to make San Francisco unified, a completely computer science district. You all have had that kind of support. That's great. We're trying to build that throughout the entire state of California.
Commissioner Cook, you want to take that too? Anything local? Are we working with companies locally?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we launched the school year, one of the founders of Twitter gave $10 million to the school district. And I believe, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but all of the Zoom software is being given at no cost to every school district that's using it, with the $10 million personal gift from Evan Williams, which is an SF Gate. It was part of it was I think 13,000 devices and 4,000 hotspots is the count that we were looking to secure from that. The district was seeking to raise a total of 25 million. So we have a long history of the founder of Salesforce being very, very generous to the school district and several districts across the country. But, we still have major gaps. And so some people have stepped up. Our hope is that they'll lead the way for others to help fill the need that we desperately need right now for our young people.
Maria, do you want to take that before we ask the final question?
Yes, thank you. And as I shared, we do have a gap. We have a gap primarily because we are asking CBOs, our nonprofit agencies, to step up and do this work with the existing contract that they have with us. And it would be better for us to make sure that we support our CBOs so that they have the necessary health benefits and the other resources that they need to do this. And this is hard work. It's mentally draining because you have to be on it, right? Because if, like the superintendent was saying, if you're not consciously aware of wearing your face mask and staying 6 feet distance, you put yourself at risk. And so we're asking our CBOs to not only care for our children, but also to be very mindful of the risk factors. And so if we could raise more money, we would definitely support our CBOs. If we could raise more money, we would make the resources available to feed all of our children. If we could raise more money, we would make sure that we close that digital divide. Right now, we have enough devices to get us through for the phase one of our rollout. And we're still fundraising for more devices. And as you all have said, we're apparently every single unified school district in the country is looking for a Chromebook. And so, a Chromebook that used to cost $200 is now closer to $1,000. And so it's very expensive. It's getting very expensive. But as I've said before, that's not an excuse. And so we're still moving forward. We're still doing it. We're still going to figure it out. But it would be so much better if everyone came under this village with us and came on this journey with us, because we can do it together.
So I want to thank everybody. Superintendent, Commissioner, Director, Jamie. This is a lightning round right now. How will history remember what we did in this time? Superintendent.
Yeah, Chuck, I was just thinking, the things we talked about last week feel like a year ago. I think the pandemic has shown us that we have to pace ourselves, be in this for the long haul. We have to pay attention to science. We have to pay attention to important health signals. This is not the first pandemic that has ever been experienced in the world. And the things that we learned from the pandemic in the early 1900s are still the things that are making a difference. Wear a face covering, wash your hands, maintain social distance. Perhaps in a few months, as the experts are saying, there will be a vaccine, but we don't know that for sure. What we do know is that the way we respond to COVID can make all the difference. And for many of us who experience a high risk, we know that the COVID has disproportionate impacts for many people of color, for people who live in Native communities, for Latinos, for African Americans, and for all people with underlying health conditions. This is serious stuff. We need leaders who refrain from making threats, but who also bring us together. We're dealing with the worldwide health pandemic. We're dealing with the pandemic of racism. We need leaders who can bring us all together and find solutions that help to keep us all safe. I am deeply I have deep respect for the leaders that you've brought on in this program, and Commissioner Sue and Trustee Cook. They're great leaders, and I've had the pleasure of working with them over the course of many years. This is challenging, and there are no easy answers, and what I'm experiencing is from many people so frustrated. They want things to be normal again, and they articulate their frustration, and I think people have a right to be frustrated. But I just hope that everyone will just remember that we don't have control over the pandemic. And even though it's frustrating and we want to be back in school, we want businesses to be reopened, we have to be safe. And we have to make decisions that for the long haul will promote long-term safety. I am hopeful that we will see a change in sooner rather than later. But until then, I just hope that we can all help each other, keep each other safe as we get through this very difficult time.
Commissioner Cook?
Well said. And I'd like to thank everyone again for attending and for allowing me to participate. History will say that San Francisco saved lives. The Atlantic article started that story with the leadership of our mayor, who also has been an incredible leader on our public schools. She helped close our deficit by $15 million, and in partnership with Director Sue is creating spaces for families to continue some sort of in-person support if they're disaster workers or if they don't have another option. They have to get support for their children, and saving lives. It continues to be at the forefront. So we are trying to figure out how we don't compromise children's futures as we keep people safe. I think we're fortunate in our city. There are other states that are fighting locally and statewide. States like Texas are telling their school districts, we won't fund you unless you open up school. So we're fortunate to be on the same page, to have a state superintendent that is supporting a lot of the local counties and to be in collaboration around the top priority, which is saving lives.
Thank you, Commissioner. Director Sue, you have the final word.
Yeah,
How will history remember what we did in San Francisco?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to participate in this really great conversation. Learned a lot and just lots of inspiring words. For me, hopefully history will say that San Francisco did not give up. San Francisco did not throw in the towel and said, let me just crawl back into our bed and sleep until 2021 gets here. And that we took the opportunity to fight, to actually fight like hell for our children, for our families, because we have the relationships. We've built the infrastructure that's there, and we leveraged what we had. We leveraged every single corner of this city's resources to make opportunities available for our children and families. And I hope that as we look back to this, we will say that this was the time where San Francisco came together. And we came together on behalf of our children, youth, and families to make their lives better and to make our city shine, because that is what we are known for.
Thank you very much. You know, I want to thank all of you again. The thanks are immeasurable. The actions that we're taking now will be remembered by history. And on behalf of the YMCA of San Francisco and my great partner, Jamie Bruning-Miles, my board of directors, I want to thank you. This is the beginning of a series of conversations that we will be having with community, because the answers lie within our hands. And as each one of our panelists have said, you know, the future is really for ours to determine. Being a native San Francisco resident, born and raised here, I have optimism about the outcome, but I know that the journey is very, very arduous to get there. So let us be united in what we're doing. Let us think about partnership and collaborations in ways that are unimaginable. And really, everyone on this line has the ability to leverage their resources, to ask one other person to do something more and something deeper. We have an immensely wealthy community that can answer the call. So let's do this together. And now I'd like to turn this to Jamie for the final words.
Thank you, Chuck. Thank you, Chuck. And I want to thank all the panelists as well. It does take a village. And Maurice, see what you're saying. This is the opportunity in history for us to work together. And I don't think any of us stepped back when the opportunity to step back was so great for us. So thank you for all of you. Thank you for supporting the YMCA and supporting your communities. We are going through two pandemics right now. We're the pandemic of COVID-19 and social systemic racism we're doing right now as a pandemic. And so your help, your support, we can get through this together. So thank you for everything. On that note,
final word. You know, Tony, my dad worked with Wilson Riles back in the day, and it's wonderful to work with you right now. So let's let history make progress, and let's all be a part of the solution. I want to thank you again, and good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Continue to be well, and thank you.
Thanks.